Hi, I'm Jennifer Jordan, and in celebration of International Mother Language Day, I invited some multilingual improvisers from the community to share their experiences and thoughts on improvising in different languages. As well as a conversation on this topic, I also invited folks to improvise a shared monologue together as one character using their mother language and any other languages that they would like, which is in a separate video and you should definitely check out. For now, though, I will let the wonderful people that I met with introduce themselves and share their thoughts and experiences. Huge thanks to Hazel, Summer, Peter, Marie, Claudia, Monika, and Bogdan for their time. You can find links to all of their various projects in the written part of this blog. But for now, enjoy.
I'm Hazel, and my first language, my native language, is Swedish, but I'm bilingual also Finnish, and then sort of almost trilingual English.
My name is Summer, and I am a native speaker of American English, and I also speak German and have improvised in Spanish and one very embarrassing scene in French.
My name is Peter. My native language is British English, and my second language was Dutch, which I was never fluent in, but I did a few shows in.
Hi, my name is Monika. I'm Polish. My native language is Polish, and I improvise in my native language and in English as a second language.
My name is Marie. I am a native German speaker. My improv language is primarily English, but I have improvised in German and Swedish before, as well as trying out all different languages that I do not speak or speak very little of.
My name is Bogdan. Most of the time I improvise in Romanian and then in English, in festivals mostly, and sometimes, really rarely, in German.
My name is Claudia. My main languages are Italian and English. My first language is Italian. My second language is English. And I speak two additional languages, German and French. I improvise in any language I can get a hold of at least two words.
For me, I actively use three languages in my life all the time. So I don't have that sort of. Obviously, I have a mother tongue, but it's a minority language. So my working language is another language. And then English, I use, for example, now with my boyfriend, but otherwise also almost daily online and things. So for me, I don't really notice like a big difference. Like I've been like trying to rack my brain around how I play in different languages. And for me, I'm interested in the aspect of language because I've been thinking about it over the last few years, and I feel very privileged and lucky to have had sort of an improv journey that started with having the possibility to learn improv from the start in my own language, even if it's a minority language.
I could actually speak English before I went to kindergarten because my dad bought an antenna, and we could get CNN and Cartoon Network. So I started performing in high school in English exclusively, although I was studying German as a native language. And then I went to acting school and I started improvising at some point. And I've always felt like performing in my native language in Romanian, it was like relearning to ride a bike, because I had learned to perform in English, and it was sort of a mask for me. And also most of the entertainment that I was consuming and that I am still consuming is in English, and not only comedy, but of course comedy has a different rhythm. So it's so different. I'm a totally different person when I improvise in English, when I improvise in German, or when I improvise in Romanian. It's fun. It's fun because it's that way, because it feels like I tap into a different world, like and the different culture and different pop culture references, right? The language comes with the entire culture behind it. It's so many references, actually. It's sometimes weird to place Romanian references in English and vice versa. And that's why it's new worlds, but it's so much fun when it actually you do that and it works. That's like a third world, right?
My second language was Dutch, or is still Dutch, although I don't live there anymore, and it's getting rustier and rustier. What I found, I noticed that I like wordplay, and I like things like that, and I found that I enjoy doing that. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it, but then when you have the limitation of you can't do any of that, my second language was never good enough to sort of really be that level with words. That's when I realized, oh, I do enjoy being able to do that, and being able to do accents, which is also something that's very hard in a second language until you get fluent. I think it's a really hard thing to do. I was more physical because that was something I could do. I was relying a lot less on words. So I was relying a lot less on words and sort of describe what was going on, which is also it's also pointed out to me because that's kind of a failing as well in English. Like we should also be, whatever language, like it shouldn't just be verbal. I'm not saying I was just verbal, but I was relying a lot on words, and so I was more physically showing things that were going on, and yeah, also not caring about what I said in as much as I know this is not going to be right. Like sometimes you can worry, they're kind of like, I want to say this right. Like I know I'm not going to say it right because my language is not strong enough to I'm going to pigeon my way through making a sentence that kind of illustrates what I want to say and not care about it.
I am also an English native speaker, but very much American, which, by the way, the Germans have two different words for. Like my native language is Amerikanisch and not English. So it's a long story. But yes, because German works the way it does. You can also say Amerikanisch is English, like that would also be fine, but it does have a separate noun. Anyway, what I notice in my native language is that just the distance between my thought and the dialogue is just shorter. Like that's the biggest thing. Because I use German in my everyday life. I translate for a living, so that's what I do. And yeah, I guess I've become very familiar with everyday life German, being pretty much the same as English. Like it's basically the same amount of speed. But if I want to form dialogue, then it just goes through a slightly different path in my brain. And it's like, okay, so it's just a tiny, like a little delay.
It's just freedom that I can be more, free in saying things, and also that I don't have to spend time on trying to understand. So I can use exactly what has been said. I can just use that. And in English, I have to transform that into what I got out of it. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's just misunderstanding, and it depends on the other player how we use it, right? If there is a bad improviser who will laugh at me, or is a good improviser who will use that, or not see this as a mistake, but knowing that I'm not native speaker, we just go on and we play more.
In terms of how much improvising I do in English versus German, I do a lot more in English because it's a thing I can sell. And in German here, it's very much like you'll have one person who's not a native speaker and everyone else is a native speaker. And that becomes then your thing if you're the non-native speaker, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's a different thing. If you find yourself being the one, as opposed to other groups in English here, where there can actually be a group where you'll have no one who's a native speaker of English, and a big mixture of other native languages. Yeah, so I'm interested in that as well. Like, how can I maybe shift that a little bit in German improv here, so there's more of a mix. And also, what happened with me in improvising in German was that I just started doing some of it, and then I moved to Spain. And then I found other German speakers in Spain, and we started doing some improv in German in Madrid, which was for different, because I ended up being then the most experienced improviser in that group, despite being the only non-native German speaker. So that was another like, oh wow, actually I'm faster than them because I'm just a faster improviser, even though the language is not as fast, which was a weird experience and wonderful. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else out of the. Yeah, I think the other thing I really want to say is I love German for improvising, because it does, even though it has a different way that it goes through my brain, it all just has a different quality as a language in a way that I find very enjoyable, in terms of constructing new words, getting to enjoy the words that have already been constructed. Yeah.
So Finnish is my second language, which is the main national language here, or the majority language. And it also has this nice quality of being very moldable, or you can make up words and they don't exist, but people understand what it is. It's sort of like there's like certain structures of how you create words, and then you can make new ones and they make sense even though they don't exist really. And so I'm imagining some similar thing like to what you said about German, and it's really fun to play with that. Yeah, and Finnish, for example, they really love, I don't remember what the term for it is in linguistics, but having sort of the beginning of the word rhyming or similar sort of. So for example, having words that start with like sa, or so it's sort of like poetic, but it's there, and people appreciate it, even if it's sort of subconscious, you don't even realize, but you can play with words like that.
I started improv in English. German is my native language. I started playing improv actually in Gothenburg 8 years ago or so, and it was with a group of all second language speakers. I think we had one native English speaker, but everybody else had English as their second language. And that's probably my comfort spot because it's where I started in. And improvising in English as a second language speaker is very different whether I improvise with other second language speakers or if I improvise with native language speakers. I have done very little in German, so I definitely recognize it's more comfortable that I understand everything in German. There's no, oh, what did this person maybe mean? But because I haven't done it much in German, I feel less comfortable playing in German because it's just not what I've done a lot, like anything else. I'm also I want to say naturally, but I just happen to be an improviser who doesn't do a lot of wordplay. And I think that comes from the language. I think if you start improvising in your native tongue, you will become more of a wordplay improviser. Not everybody, but it's more likely because you find that comfort in your own language first.
When I was younger, at some point, I binge watched Seinfeld. And without realizing, I started speaking like him, and the same rhythm and the same kind of, the rhythm. Yeah, it's actually the rhythm. And at some point I listened to a famous short story from a famous Romanian writer, and he's so funny but also so intellectual, and the way that he uses words. And I thought I don't phrase things like this, and that's because I don't think I consume enough entertainment in Romanian. So I actually at some point think that I was funnier in English than in Romanian, because in Romanian I didn't really know how to. Well, of course, time has passed and I've learned a lot and so on. I'm not saying that I'm always there. I'm more of a glue kind of improviser. I like to make things make sense.
So after studying a language that is not mine and working in a language that is not mine, is the majority language, I was I was still in uni when I started doing improv, and suddenly I found like a group of people and a full like network of people in my language, and so it was natural, but it's still afterwards I've realized that this is not always the case, and especially this past, like during the pandemic, with people having international conversations a lot on Facebook or in online meetings about the prevalence of English as sort of a dominant improv language. I realized that it's a privilege to be able to improvise in my own language, especially since it's not English. And so that's sort of one aspect. And then my team, we actually a few years ago, we developed a format that's bilingual. It's called like Bilingual Every Day, because like I had an idea from the fact that our everyday life is so different. Like it's not, we don't see it on stage, we don't see it in films, the sort of fluent bilinguality where you might have, like, you speak to someone, your phone rings, you switch language and no one even blinks an eye. Or even in like a relationship, you might, like I have a friend who used to speak her language and her husband spoke the other one, and they didn't like, and they both understood, but they wouldn't switch. And so you have these situations, but you never really see them, especially on an improv stage, maybe in some indie films, or I don't know. So we did a format where the language wasn't a gimmick. It was just characters could be either, and they could switch, and they might understand each other. They might not, if their character is monolingual or bilingual. Or so I've sort of been interested in aspects of language and improv for a long time. Unfortunately, there's a few characters that is like the one who speaks Finnish usually speaks less and speaks very abruptly and shortly, and the one who's Swedish is usually from a specific class or like it, and has this tone. So yeah, we try to also get away from that, but it does come out, you know. Sometimes it's in good, I mean, mostly it's a positive thing, but sometimes you do several shows and you're like, that's that. Is that rich old lady again? Why is she always here? You know, with a specific accent or dialect. Yeah. A few times I've done not maybe shows, but scenes where people get to speak their own language, and then you can take it as gibberish if you want, or then you can understand a few words, and to make it sort of joyful, playful, or normal that we all speak different languages. And
playing now with Jeff, who is a Polish original, but he doesn't speak Polish. He knows just really few words. And almost every show we play together, we have like one scene when I play in Polish and he plays in English, and he completely doesn't get what I say. And sometimes when, you know, the words are, because of Latin or other roots, are similar to English, he can get like one word or something, but it's funny to play. So he has to guess, you know, and it's a big fun to play also that way, to challenge myself to run the scene, but also challenge the other person not to get what's being said. So it's an audience like it. They like to see like how they manage this, you know, how it's going on. So it's a lovely experience to do that both direction, actually. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to bounce off of what everybody said. That if I don't get what happens during a scene, I think, well, if I don't get it, it's less likely that the audience gets it. So clarification is obviously, I need to understand what the hell it's all about. What one of my most beloved experiences in improv was during Chicago. We had this show that was called One World, One Stage, and it was Joe Bill was teaching it, and we were like 20 or 30 improvisers from all over the world, and there was just one person that was allowed to speak in English, and everyone else had to speak in their own language. And it was the most fun I've ever had during a festival show, and I always gladly revisit that kind of experience where, because on top of any language, we speak improv, and there's the connection is there either way. Even if we pretend that we know what the scene is about and we have no idea, or if we have an idea what the scene is about and we pretend that you know what I'm talking about. Well, yeah, first of all, I think we speak improv, and that's the whole point, you know, to really focus and look. The next line, I always tell my students, the next line is in your partner's eyes.
If I play with people who speak English but don't come from where I come from, or are not sensitive to the fact that I'm not from there, then I might have some issues or feel like I'm not heard, or I'm not sort of equal, because I haven't grown up. I don't know nursery rhymes. I don't know Shakespeare. I have, for example, for the British context, or I don't know US celebrities, or I don't know, snacks that people used to eat when they were small. And sometimes if you speak something fluently, if you speak a language fluently, people don't realize that you don't know all that stuff. So if it's a very like fast-paced show with lots and lots of sort of names and, you know, this kind of cultural context and things, that really makes me feel like an outsider.
What I see improvising with, especially with native speakers, is that that brings the problem that I'm pretty fluent. Everyone thinks that I'm like perfect in English. I get everything. I understand everything. And then, well, I'm not. So, so there is a lot of things I do not get. So this experience rise at the very beginning a lot of stress, because people who I improvised with most of the time didn't realize that there is a problem with not native speakers, which is I think very common on every festival, on every even workshop which is international or something like that. And what that does to me when I do not get things, you know, we all know that being present in improv is the most important thing, or one of the most important things. And what that does, that it gets, I think, everyone out of being present, because if we don't understand something, we stuck in this moment of what's that? What's going on? I don't get it. And then the scene goes on, people still talking, the situation is changing, and you still sitting in your mind, what has just have happened, right? I don't know where I am. What was it? Should I know? Is this important? Should I ask now, or it's too late? Where the scene went, right? So after, when you don't get that thing, it can be just a simple word. It can bring avalanche of confusion, judging, being lost, and many other things which you can't explain in the scene. And after a while, also people can recognize, like, okay, we had this nice scene, we understood everything, and now where we are, why Monika is not getting it, right? So that brings stress, because you feel like an idiot in the scene who doesn't get the scene, but you just didn't get what was what just happened in the language level.
I have two things. First of all, I would encourage people that don't improvise in another language because maybe they only feel comfortable in one. Watch improv and theatre in other languages. Even if you can't understand a word, you learn so much from it. The other thing is, what is an English native speaker? Because people that have English as their native language, but haven't, even as close as people from the US in London, still have the same issues. Like it can be as close as within the UK. Like if you're from Scotland and you come down to London, or if you like, it can be that you have the same native language, but you still have some of the very same experiences, especially if you go into like a really in a specific area. But English is the first language to so many people in the world who maybe speakers in the UK or the US would be like, this is not proper English, but English is the first language to people in Singapore, to people in a lot of parts of Africa, in India. It's like, it's so many parts of the world. Like, I think it's so well to be aware that what's our mother tongue is such a specific thing, and therefore, even if English is your mother tongue, you might have the exact same experience than if English is a second language to you. I, for example, do have this a little bit when improvising in German, because I'm from Austria. It's officially German. It's a little different. It's like somebody from Scotland speaking English, and it means my cultural reference are Austrian references, not necessarily German references. So I don't actually get that, oh, now I'm improvising in my first language and I can use all my references when I improvise in Germany. Like, what is mother tongue is so interesting, and how it's different to first language.
I think it's very important to remember that language has to do with culture, has to do with identity, has to do with personal history. So English as a second, I always sound like I'm the most verbose person in the world. I am, but I use English as a second for an and or additional language, because it's such a personal relationship that one has with the languages that they speak. It's about getting the circle bigger. It's about, for example, asking ourselves, as Marie was saying, are we relying on verbal expression and communication too much of our improv? Could it be a rule of improv that we might tackle on a bit more in our sessions? We have met each other at our first meeting as improv as a second language, ISL, improv as a second language, here in London. It took place in 2019, and there were two people, me and her, and it was fun. It was a group born to be a community for all improvisers, or all London-based improvisers who didn't recognize English as their native first or main language. And we met there. We started meeting with all London-based improvisers, and then during the pandemic we started offering the same concept but on Zoom. So we got to know a lot of people from all over the world that improvise in English, English being a second for and or additional language for them.
I generally think improvising in a second language is a gift. I hate calling it a problem, because it's not. I think it's a gift also to a native speaker who improvises with a second language speaker, because we tend to do, like Bogdan said, a reference from Romania won't make sense in English, but also a reference from somebody who grew up in the 90s won't make sense to somebody who grew up in the 70s. Or a reference of somebody who grew up in London might not make sense to somebody who grew up in Scotland or the US or South Africa or Australia. And these are all places people speak English as their native language. So I think, in a way, improvising with a second language speaker gives you that.
If I can piggyback back on that, the idea that ISL has always tried to bring forward is that it's it's about making the circle bigger. So there's not just a small circle of people that might not know a reference or might know the meaning of the word or might not speak a specific language. It's about the shared experience of not knowing the meaning of the word, not knowing the cultural reference, not being fluent in a language. One thing that we said a lot of times is that fluency is uninfluential, error intended. And we also said that any speaker of the English language doesn't have 100% understanding of all the words. And one of the things that we saw happening during our sessions is people caring less about not understanding a word, people feeling just freer saying, oh, what does that mean? Okay. Or people feeling freer to just say, could you repeat that? And that's it. You just repeat the sentence and you go on with the scene. And it's about normalizing the not knowing, normalizing not knowing, which is something that improv does a lot. Whatever societal ideas, societal rules dictate as a mistake or a failure, it's not. Chill.
At some point, I was invited in Köln to perform in German, and I don't speak German on a regular basis. I just did it in school, and that was it. And I accepted, and I was really nervous. And we had 3 days for a workshop to build 2 shows. And I had huge headaches because I was trying to remember all of the German, and my head was literally killing me for 3 straight days. I was exhausted when I went to bed because I was trying to access all the words that I needed. And at some point in a scene, it was a really long scene about a bunch of professors that had a problem in a school, and I didn't say anything during the whole scene. And they were debating, and it got heated up. And at the end of the scene, it was actually also the end of the show. I was asked, so what's your opinion, Professor? I don't know. And I said, I was just having an imaginary coffee. And I said, I don't know, I'm just here for the coffee. And it was lights out, and that was it. So yeah, I felt everything that Monika said, because I didn't quite catch everything, but I tried to be present and part of the scene.
We speak too much. Like most improv shows have too many words in it. And if we actually limit it in our words, so I encourage people to improvise in languages where they only speak 5 words. And the story that Bogdan told to me sounded like he made the scene. Probably the audience had no clue what those 5 doctors were talking about, but they were wondering why this one wasn't talking. And that, like, we speak too much. We are too much like, oh, but I said this, you needed to understand. I think as an improviser, regarding of the language the other person speaks, if it wasn't received, it's not that they're not yes-ending you. It's maybe that you didn't communicate it well enough. Even if it was really clear to you, it might have not been clear to the other person. So either let it go, or state it again. Mm-hmm. And then obviously don't use this in order to put something on somebody that they don't want. If they clearly say no to an offer, which you should always be allowed to do, we should respect that. But I think if the other person didn't understand you, say it a second time. And I think sometimes you get the most funniest scenes out of misunderstandings. And sometimes even when neither of the improvisers understand, but the audience understand. So yeah, I think being a second language speaker is a gift. I do think there should be, as a second language speaker, I should have this safe space where I can improvise with other second language speakers. Because I've lived in the UK for over 5 years. The last 10 years, English has been more or less the main language in my life, sometimes equal to German, but German hasn't been stronger than English. I still am a second language speaker. I still don't understand everything, and it's still frustrating. And it's better when I'm with other second language speakers. And one last thing I wanted to add about the question of, are my characters different in different languages? I mean, I don't improvise enough in German to answer this, but I know I am different when I speak in German. Like my character is different. There's scientific studies that show that bilingual people have different character traits in different languages. So of course our improvised characters will be different.
There are cultural differences in humor and approach to, as I think, characters as well. Like I think Dutch is the Dutch, particularly like Dutch humor, they're quite it's blunter, almost feels like, compared to British humor, where we kind of like to be clever with it and we kind of like to things to fancy it up.
There's definitely a difference in the performance of gender between my like native culture, particularly. So I come from California. And then, yeah, and the performance of gender in, I mean, specifically this part of Germany, but in other German-speaking countries as well. So that's, like, if I'm going to telegraph that I'm playing a character of a particular gender, then I will do that differently. The thing is, I'm not even sure I would use any particular change in the language. I think it would be more, I don't know, the things that you would say would be different, but.
Is it because of, are you anticipating that it's because of the audience and you want to cater to them, or is it something that's inherent in the language when you use it? Because for me, it would be the audience. I'm aware of who is in the audience.
Yeah, I think it has more to do with the audience and my relationship to how I think.
Yeah.
That's a weird thing, but I think that my improvising and my character especially don't change much, you know? I think that the only thing which really matters when I play in Polish is that I don't have to think, you know, what I'm saying. Like, I mean, I can say, well, the words are coming. So I can say what I want to say. In English, sometimes I will stuck and I will express what I want, but probably not with the right words or not with the right grammar, or, you know, I will look for some, you know, if I will not know the word lawyer, I will say, you know, the guy which can bring me to prison or whatever it is, you know, whatever. I will find a way how to explain that, which might be maybe funny or what, but I don't think that this changes in my characters and me playing. And also I'm not a player who will use a lot of word games. I'm more into relationships. And basically, I think that's the great advice to everyone who improvises, that if you lose whatever you loses, you just play with relationships. So you react to what the other person does, and it will work.
I'll just add one other thing, also connecting to what Bogdan said about language having an entire culture around it. The other incredible opportunity that is improvising in different languages, it's that the language is also associated with theater style. So I had an Italian friend coming to London back in the days, and they saw, oh no, the show was amazing. They sure speak a lot, because the style, the theatrical style, the preference is very, very different depending on the theatrical tradition. And another thing that one has to constantly keep in mind is that since language is embedded in culture, there is an intrinsic value of being a person who speaks English as a second foreign or additional language in a country, for example, that has voted for Brexit. There is a value in that, and there is a sense, and there is, you know, a lived experience connected to that, of occupying the stage, of being there. So yeah, culture means also historical context.
I think it's important that we learn as not native speakers tools, but usually I think that's the problem, that's the very difficult thing, because nobody is teaching it. I mean, you just go to workshop, And if you're lucky, the whole group is second language. But if you're not lucky and you're the only one, usually nobody takes care of you. I mean, there are teachers who say like, hey, wait, we have, or whatever, or if you don't understand me, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't help because other people have no, also no knowledge or awareness how to treat other people who don't speak your language. So they do not slow down. They do not think, okay, you don't understand. They are not aware of that. And I think that for me, in the festivals, all the travels, workshops, and everywhere I went, is really important to make it as a thing, to talk to people about it and make everyone aware of that. Because we, as not native speakers, we are all aware what that means to go to a workshop where you don't get everything. But for native speakers, it's just like, okay, I'm teaching, I'm speaking, everyone gets it, right? If not, somebody can raise the hand. Even you can explain in your own language to native speakers and they sometimes might not get it, right? But you live in the world where you get everything and everyone supposed to understand. But as a second language person, you are constantly in the world that nobody takes care of you. Because people do not slow down, they use very quick, even like simple word, simple sentence told by, and I experienced this at May Day's retreat where people came from Ireland or other places where English for me was not like even English. And, and they speak and they think it's everything okay and everyone understand, but I was like, what? Like even give me a cup was a problem to understand, right? And my brain was like searching what that means. And I think that's awareness, which we have to build around us ourselves as not native speakers, but also I think people who speak their native language, as English, let's say, they also should be more aware and more aware, I think.
Monika said nobody teaches these things. I actually offer workshops to these topics.
Sorry.
No, I just thought I mentioned that. They are on my website. There aren't any planned at the moment, but they're on my website. It's my favorite topic to teach on. What I experience a lot is people don't like to book those workshops because they don't want to recognize it's a topic. It's something we need to talk about because they feel, if I say in the beginning of a workshop, my English isn't my first language, that's enough. Or if I give my students the possibility to do that, because I also offer workshops to native speakers. I find I have seen it myself that teachers dismiss those sentences. I have been used as an example. Like if another student says, English is my second language, I might not understand everything. They go, yeah, but Marie's second language is English as well, which I find very dismissive. Because first of all, not every second language speaker is the same. And it's not something that needs to just be said in the beginning, something that we need to be aware. And it's not fair towards the second language speaker that they have to raise their hand and say it. I think we should always, as improv teachers, it's something we should teach towards those second language speakers or towards those people that might have difficulties understanding for whatever reason. And I think it's just a topic we need to be, like, I think as the community, be more aware, and so easily, because I would like to, and I know other second language speakers who do it, because it's like, yeah, but my English is fine, it's good, I don't have any issues. And it's not true. I'm completely fluent in English, I dream in English. English is the more permanent language in my life. I still am a second language speaker when I improvise. I can still tell it all the time. But people don't want to be pointed out as second language speakers, and they're scared that maybe they won't be cast in a group, or they might not get stage time, or they might not get to teach, or they might not whatever. And that's why they're like, no, this is not a thing for me. I hear that a lot as well. It shouldn't be on the second language speakers that we have to have a toolbox and we have to learn tools, because we learn them anyway. It's like any minority. If I look at a stage in London, like if Claudia and me perform in an evening, it's often that we are the only second language speakers on stage, or maybe there's one other person. So I think there should be a priority of English, of people in their native language, whatever language that is, to have tools how to be understood by everyone.
Okay, this is one thing I want to formulate because I need to remember it. And if I say it, then maybe I'll remember it. And that's this difference between expressing and communicating. Because words have this function of translating for ourselves, where we're like, I have this feeling inside of me, and I'm not entirely sure what it is, but if I put it into words, I will understand it better. And that for me is words or language as expression, because we're not really interested in whether or not someone else understands it, right? Like we're more interested in just like getting it out.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I'm really trying to think if that's part of the feeling that is different in a native language, so that you're more likely to do that kind of expression use of language in your native language because you simply do not care. But then I think about it, I'm like, no, there's definitely times when I've done that in German because German was better for it in the moment. So yeah, but that makes me think a lot about this. When you know that the other person is not a native speaker, also though, I think you're less likely to do that kind of expression type.
Because I think it's something you don't have to think about if you're performing in your native language with an audience that's a native speaker. You don't really have to think, will they understand this? But I mean, I did a lot of performing I performed a lot in English when I was in the Netherlands, and the audience was very from everywhere, and the level of English was across the board. And so you kind of have to, certainly any local British references, no, they're not going to work at all. And you just have to kind of think a bit more about the words you use. Like I definitely when I moved back to Britain, I definitely sort of had more of like an international English vocabulary. And certainly that's what I use on stage rather than the sort of the broader British English vocabulary, which is quite large, but there's a lot of words in there that unless you've been speaking English your whole life, you won't know a lot of these words, and using them on stage to an audience that won't get them is, not really fair on them, etc.
The interesting thing with English, I would say, is that many smaller countries or less affluent countries, in those countries, people sometimes know English more because the countries can't afford dubbing. So that's the case with Scandinavia and Romania. I was also very surprised. I was there in 2001, and even some old ladies in the kiosk were speaking English like enough to, whereas all throughout we went to Poland and you could not, like, there was not even an interest in any communication when trying to like shop for things like food. And I realized the difference is that these countries have a big enough population that they can afford to dub, and they have also this sort of, like, it also leads to like a language pride, I suppose, in the culture. Many of the big ones, Poland, France, Italy, Spain, they have enough of people that they don't dub, which, I mean, they do dub. I mean, it's good because they have a very strong understanding and sort of feeling of their own language, but it also leads to them not being comfortable with subtitles. And so the smaller countries usually have a higher sort of percentage of people who understand English because of this.
Wow, yeah, it's a whole separate, like, the people so the most famous example in German dubbing is the voice for Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Is very famous, and and that's what he does. He dubs the voice of Bruce Willis. Like, that's his career. And I mean, no insult to Bruce Willis, but I do think it is a better voice.
I heard something that apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger someone dubs his voice when they do it in German because he has a bit of a rural accent, and they don't think it, and so people want a different voice for him, which.
I just wanted to question the meaning of native language, as all language is acquired, because I think it's it's an interesting thing to wonder about. All language is acquired, all language is made up, all rules are made up, or concepts of right and wrong are made up when it comes to language. It's just something that a lot of people agreed on at a certain point in history, and then we kind of stuck with it and very, very much resisted to any change to it. So I just wanted to bring this forward.
I think it's about realizing the privilege you have if you improvise with all people that have the exact same language and cultural references than you have. I think that's like not, and there's so many people who don't see that privilege because it's just normal to you, especially if you live the same place your whole life, that everybody has the same language and cultural references as you.